Hey guys, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Welcome back to my channel. So here I am back for another currently inked video, and these are becoming some of my favorite videos to film. Not just to film, but to also see everybody's comments about what inks they're using, what pen ink paper combinations they're loving. I love the conversations that these types of videos bring out. So for the month of May, I almost said April, but for the month of May, I only have 5 pens inked up right now. I found that in the month of April it was almost too many pens and I wasn't using all of them quite enough. So just a quick recap of the currently ink that I had for April. So let's zoom in here. So these were the 6 pens that I had inked up in April. I had my Pilot Vanishing Point with Pilot Iroshizuku Kujiku, my Pilot Kakuno with Noodler's Lexington Gray, my Lamy Vista with Colorverse Alpha PSE, or Pisces I think that's what it is, my Sailor Pro Gear with Troublemaker Milky Ocean, Pelikan M400 with the Sailor Shikiori Yozakura, and my Cross Botanica Green Daylily with the Herbon Ombre de Burmany. And now Lucy decides to bark. Can you guys hear her? Anyway, I found out of these 6 pens, my favorites to write with were, I really loved writing with my Pelikan M400. The shading with that pen in my 5-year journal is just so pretty. And I actually really like the thickness of that nib. It doesn't write like an E or an extra fine. It writes even a bit like the fine in the Cross Botanica. So, gosh, I'm out of breath. I ran up and down the stairs just now. Okay, I loved writing with my Pelikan. The next one I loved writing with was my Pilot Vanishing Point with the Kujiku. That pen and ink combination was fantastic. I loved the two together, and that color is just amazing. And then the one that I also loved again was the Cross Botanica. You know, this is always a surprise for me that it works really well with the Herbon ink. So, you know, I loved that combination, and that color is just awesome. But what I found was that having 6 pens inked up was a lot for me, and I didn't get a chance to really use all of these combinations as much as I wanted to. So I'm going to try going forward, maybe just sticking to 5 or seeing how I feel and seeing how I can get through those pens and inks. So let's prep the selection or the page then in my notebooks for the next month. Okay, so the first pen I have inked up is my Esterbrook JR. So this is a pocket pen in the Fantasia, and this was the one that I won from PenChalet. And this one started off as not the best or smoothest nib. I had to work on the nib a little bit, put some brass sheets in between the tines to try and clean it out and smooth it out. So I had decided that I would try it with Robert Oster Bondi Blue to see maybe it was the pen and ink combination. So let's do that here. So that is Robert Oster Bondi Blue in my Esterbrook JR Fantasia with an extra fine nib. And I actually really like the way that it writes now. There is a bit of feedback and there's a bit of tooth because it is an extra fine nib, but it is a lot smoother than when I first got it. And I love the color of this ink. It's just this beautiful bright blue, and then when it dries it's got a bit of red sheen around the edges. This is actually the ink that I'm going to be using in my A6 5-year journal for the month of May. The next pen that I have inked for May is my Sailor Pro Gear Slim Dragon Palace, and it is currently inked up with, which one is it? Robert Oster Avocado. So this one and the Esterbrook, I felt like I could match the color to the pen, and I don't normally do that, but I tried to get that matched with all the other pens as well, but it didn't work out. So I'm really excited to try a new green. Greens are really my favorite color, and I do love different types of greens as well. So I always find that writing on the Midori paper feels a bit drier with the pens. Oh gosh, it's not an EF, it's a medium fine. Medium. Ah, crap. I feel like it looks really, really similar to PSC, but actually it doesn't now that I compare the two. It doesn't really look that similar. So Robert Oster Avocado in my Sailor Pro Gear Slim. I think it actually feels a little wetter on the Hobonichi or the Tomoe River paper than it does on the Midori, but it's not as wet as the Bondi Blue. The Bondi Blue is a much wetter ink, I feel, but it also could be the pen. I think it would have really, really great shading if I had a slightly broader nib, but I do love the color of it and I'm excited to use it for the month of May. The next pen that I have inked is my Pilot Vanishing Point Decimo in the champagne color, and this was the first gold nib that I ever purchased for my collection, and I absolutely love it. And it is currently inked up with Pilot Iroshizuku Murasaki Shikibu. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I'm actually really excited to use this purple. I was originally going to ink it up with Yamabudo, but I'm like, nah, I want to use that with something else. So excited for this. And if you're not familiar with the Vanishing Point Decimo, I love it because of the retractable nib. Gosh, I'm looking at my nails and there's already ink everywhere. I do apologize for that. So Pilot Iroshizuku Murasaki Shikibu. I love this purple. I love how bright it is. I'm not seeing a ton of shading right now, but just looking at, like, you know, the way that the swatch goes on the square and in those little drops that I do or draw out, there's a little bit of shading, but I actually just really like how, I don't want to say simple a purple is, but it's a bright purple. It's not too complex. I really like it. So I'm looking forward to using this in my Pilot Vanishing Point Decimo with a fine nib. The next pen that I have inked is also a Pilot, but it's the Pilot Kakuno, and I had this inked up last month as well with Noodler's Lexington Gray, but I did empty that out. I didn't use the whole ink that was in here, and somebody asked me this last month, like, what do you do at the end of the month? Do you use it until it's written dry? Do you empty it out? What do you do? And it really depends on the pen and the ink. I am a little bit type A when it comes to my currently inked. I want to have all of May with different inks and different pens. So some of the pens I've cleaned out with a tiny bit of ink still left in them. Like, it's not even, you know, half a milliliter or a quarter of a milliliter that I'm throwing out. I don't have a problem with wasting that. And I would rather clean them out than leave them just sitting around and me not using them and then risk getting all of the ink gunked up in there. So I would rather clean it out if I'm not using it for the whole month. So I knew that I wanted to use the Pilot Kakuno with Yamabudo, which I'm so excited about. So Pilot Iroshizuku Yamabudo, and I didn't mind. Like, there was barely any of the Noodler's Lexington Gray left in it, and it's such a huge bottle that you get, so I didn't mind emptying some of that out. So my Pilot Kakuno with the Pilot Iroshizuku Yamabudo. Like, look at that. And the Pilot Kakuno has a fine nib. I recently sold my other Pilot Kakuno with the extra fine nib, and I actually I'm finding that I am preferring slightly broader nibs now. I probably won't go so far as to say I want a broad nib, but I did like using the Pelikan M400 and the width of that, as well as my Cross Botanica. Really liking those two. I love how smooth this Pilot nib is, and the wetness of this ink, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And actually a lot of the stickers that I am creating for my new release in May, I'm basing off the colors from Pilot Iroshizuku inks. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And you can tell there's a bit of a color variation between the Midori paper as well as the Hobonichi paper, so I'm really excited. I don't use the Midori paper in day-to-day life, like in planning or anything. It really is strictly for an ink journal, so I don't necessarily need to test it on Midori paper, but it's still nice to be able to look at. And plus, when you flip the pages of the Midori, once it's all full of ink, it just sounds amazing. So my last pen, the last pen in my currently inked for May, is my Lamy All-Star in Cosmic with an extra fine nib. So for the month of April, I used the Lamy Vista with a fine Lamy nib, and I absolutely loved it. And this one is inked up with Robert Oster Chartreuse. No, the ink does not match the color of the pen, and normally it doesn't bother me, but with these ones, most of them, well, have somewhat of a match. But also, I think with the Chartreuse, I really would have liked to have seen it in a clear demonstrator, but I think I'll be okay. Look at that yellow. Not everybody is a big fan of this color, but I saw it on Adventure Denali. And this is an EF nib. I just noticed that my lineup is very Robert Oster Pilot Iroshizuku heavy. Is that how you spell chartreuse? Yes. But look at the shading on that already. Beautiful. I actually really do like my Lamy Vista and my Lamy All-Star. The Lamy nib, surprisingly, for me, is going really well. My very first Lamy was a Lamy Safari, and I just did not like that black steel nib. Not a fan. But then I also bought the Lamy Vista, and that one had a very smooth, extra fine nib, so I don't know what happened there. So extra fine nib. And even as I'm writing, you can see the shading and the changing of the color from like this kind of olive green to the yellow. Really liking that. So there is my currently inked lineup for the month of May. I'm really excited to use these different colors, especially the Murasaki Shikibu and the Yamabu. Actually, no, I'm excited to use all of them. And I'm excited to try out the different combinations, especially with the Robert Oster inks, because I haven't really dedicated a whole month to Robert Oster inks before, so this will be really interesting. And this is actually ensuring that I'm using the samples that I purchased. All right, so what inks are you guys using for the month of May? What pen, ink, paper combinations are working for you? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know if there's any of these that you think would work out really well for you. Thanks again so much for watching, guys, and I appreciate every single one of you for tuning in and listening to me ramble about fountain pens and inks. Thanks again, and have yourselves a great day.